All right, little note here before we get to Brian Christopherson. Y'all will get to meet the Kale Shorts, Phil Simpson, and Phil Snow tomorrow. And then I guess Mike Eck. Oh, wait. And then in March, Mike Eckler and Addison Williams, Terry Braden will meet. And then the next Tuesday in March, Matt Rule will meet with everybody. Nebraska will begin spring practice on March 24th. Nebraska's Pro Day will be March 25th. Do what you will with that information, but tomorrow we will have content. We now have good content with Brian Christopherson, who is over his cold. Good morning.
Hey, guys. How are you doing?
How are you doing?
I feel good.
How would you describe to a first-time college basketball viewer last night's game at PBA?
Maybe this is my warped personality. I sort of enjoyed it. It was such a grinder of a game, times 100 that at some point, like it was about 11 minutes in when I realized nobody besides Bryce Williams had scored for Nebraska. I realized that the entire time, but it was really sinking like this is a thing now. And then Connor Esigian scored a basket. I think at the 11.5-minute mark. And I was like, all right, I am going to fully embrace what this is about. The thing is, Nebraska was 13-1, I believe, in games where they held teams to under 70 points or less. And how about holding a team under 50 and still losing? Yeah. So that's the kind of kick in the jewels about the whole thing, I guess.
Is this season now, after yesterday's game, do you get the vibe that it's just, hey, make it to the tournament, and if you win a game, you win a game. If you don't, you don't?
Yeah, I mean, it's still out there for them.
Yeah,
that possibility, and they got to protect home court the rest of the way. Minnesota's been playing better basketball, and there's a logjam in those Big Ten standings too, where there's sort of been this talk about Nebraska getting a bye and stuff. Like, you got to be very careful here about slipping down and being like the 14th seed in this thing.
Yeah.
When it's all said and done. So, I think Fred hit the right tone in the post game that he had to after a tough defeat like that. It's like, that's what I need from you guys, defensive energy wise, the rest of the way. And if you give me that, a few more shots are going to fall, and we're going to get over the top over these other teams. So I think that was the right tone, but it was definitely a missed opportunity because there was just so many. I felt like good looks that were missed. I know Michigan did a nice job defensively and shrunk the floor on Nebraska. Nonetheless, there were these plays where Jawan just didn't settle his feet, and Andrew Morgan had one that should have been an and one, and I mean, all those just come back to bite you in the tail when it's all said and done.
That was such a nuclear level of sickness last night watching that basketball game. All right, let's get off of basketball. Let's go to football.
Okay.
So there's a lot of proposals out there on what they're going to do with the college football calendar. They're going to move the portal, spring game, no spring game. There's a lot of discussion. We just need somebody to take the lead. And I think Jedd Fisch has done this. He has proposed a portal window of April 15th to May 15th, and then doing, like the NFL, OTAs. So we are kind of NFL light. But let's talk about the product on the field. Is there a way, because I think the product on the field, the way the game is played, is really good. But if they make these kind of changes where you could have a portal window in April and April 15th to May 15th, but then you get your newcomers and your transfers on that you can work out with them and have like structured OTAs before the season begins. Do you think there are changes out there in the calendar that actually can help benefit the product on the field?
Yeah, that's not a terrible idea on the surface by Fisch. So his is, what were the dates again? It was April 15th through the 25th.
So basically you wouldn't have spring ball as we know it. And then the portal would open April 15th to May 15th. And then during that, when you start like the summer semester, The newcomers, the portal guys are there. Your newcomers are there. And then you can have like OTAs. Like you can have 12 practices, some padded and some not padded, or do the normal spring football schedule in college football. You just do it like in the beginning of May or the middle of May to maybe the middle of June. And then you get another month off. You're still working out and everything before you start camp.
As you're saying that, I'm going to answer selfishly and say I would push back initially on it because I'm right now, like, I'm thinking of like the last even week or two, and I'm just like kind of going stir crazy. Like, I'm happy that there's media access tomorrow, but I almost feel like there's a lot to be said for that window of spring practices, even if people don't think it's much, where you get content and you keep it going. And so I don't know if there's a way where you could shorten the spring calendar in March, April, where you get 10 practices, and then there is that window for the portal you're talking about, and then perhaps like you extend and have some more OTA type stuff. I wonder if you can get the best of both worlds, but I do like that people are trying to think through how do we get past sort of like the December crush that everybody felt a couple months ago, because I honestly feel like everybody in college football has sort of been trying to decompress from that and it come back after that crazy month. And so there does have to be a better way, but I don't know. As a media guy, I am like craving spring football right now in a strange way, and that I haven't in the past. So it just feels so quiet around here. So I am glad we have access tomorrow with Phil Simpson, Phil Snow, and DeKill Shorts.
I think a common conversation we're having in college football now, Brian, is that coaches are getting less and less time to develop programs. That just throughout the entirety of the sport, just coaches aren't getting as long as a leash as they used to. The Big Ten and SEC now and all the other conferences are talking about the future of the college football playoff. And, it seems like we're probably going to go to a 16-team playoff. If that were to happen, do you think that shortens the leash in the eyes of the athletic department on coaches that they hire? That they have to get there. And now that there's 16 teams, you have to get. We're not just giving you 3-4 years anymore. We expect in 2 to 3 to be competing for those spots. Do you think the expansion of the playoff does that?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it just gets shorter and shorter anyway. Like it used to be, like you always had 4 to 5 years, and now it feels like it's more 3 to 4. And I think what you're saying is probably true. You might start to get closer to that like 2 to 3 year window where, okay, you didn't get to the, a bigger field and make it and make waves. You're gone. So I do think there would be more pressure with that. That's the good thing for coaches, I guess, is that there's more slots open to get in the playoff, but there is that other side of it where it's like, okay, you didn't get there. All right. It's time to look a different direction. So I don't love that because I'm probably a more patient guy with coaches than some people, and I feel like you should almost get at least 4 years in most cases, unless it's just completely off the rails. But I do think you're onto something where the more you open up the field to people, the pressure's on. Like you got to get in there. You got to be a presence, and our program has to be heard from.
So there's a part of like talking about this calendar, and if you look at players that have off-season surgeries, like right when the season is over, I mean, would they be in line to go, okay, you don't have to be healthy until the middle of May, and you can participate in OTAs instead of completely missing spring football? And what this is going to lead me into. So, as we're all jonesing for some college football coverage, 24/7, which you are part of, did there, and it was, you had to scroll down. And so I was like, okay, I want to see this. College football's breakout second-year players on offense. And there's a lot of Miami guys on there. And you're scrolling, you're like, oh, okay, I remember that name from Clemson. Then you get to Carter Nelson, who is on the 24/7 list of potential sophomore breakout stars. Here's a guy who had off-season surgery. We don't know what his availability will be for spring ball. But what do you think? Because he's going to be a fascinating guy coming into the fall, BC. The wide receiver room is deeper.
Mm-hmm.
There's Harburg at tight end. Nelson's a tweener, but he's in an offense that is probably better for him in his skill set. What do you think? Like, if he's going to be a breakout guy, what does a breakout season in year 2 look like for Carter Nelson, who made the adjustment from 8-man to 11-man and ended up with 10 catches and a touchdown, but played all 13 games?
Mm. Yeah, it probably looks more like it's an interesting question because actually they could be potentially deep at like tight end, and if he's going to play more of that, like I think Harburg is going to fit really well there. I think everybody was starting to fall more in like with Luke Lindenmeyer and sort of what his skill set is, and then Mac Markway is still over there, like after his injury, and I know he was is fired up to get back out there. So I think Carter could have a season of progress if he gets fully healthy, and he could catch like 25 to 30 balls. And some people might say, well, that's not enough. I expected more of a hike than that. But I think if other guys around him are sort of maximizing what we think they can do, and you threw, you had 25 catches from Carter Nelson mixed in with that, and you were able to accent his skill set to a higher degree than that first season, then I think that would be a success. So something like that, probably in that 25, 30 catch range. But, the first things first is just getting healthy from that. I know it was a tricky surgery, and I've heard it, maybe it could take up to 6 months or whatever the timetable was there. And so I just hope by the summer, especially, you don't rush it too quickly, and he feels like he's got his feet under him and he's just ready to attack the fall like we know he can and has the capabilities because he is a freak athlete.
So Ben Scott, Micah Mazuka, there's Billy Kemp IV, there's Jamal Banks, there's Isaiah Nayer, there's Marcus Washington. All those were former transfers that came into Nebraska. And what all those guys have in common was that they were former Power 5 guys. And we've seen this with Matt Rule in his transfer classes. It was a lot of heavy upside Power 5 players. But this season, we've seen him dip into the non-Power 5 talent pool and take guys who are high production dudes in non-Power 5 teams, Jalen George, Marquise Watson-Trent, and Andrew Marshall. If those three guys, and it was a bit of a change of a strategy, and you and I had talked about earlier, about a month and a half ago, about how maybe Kurt Signetti and his success with Indiana might have affected that. But do you think if those three players, those non-Power 5 guys, end up being high production players for Nebraska this season, that it could even more shift Matt Rule's mindset toward transfer portal guys he's going out and acquiring from where they're coming from?
Possibly. I mean, I think you got to look at every case on its own, but
Sure.
I do think you got to go back to like the press conference when he said he was talking sort of about Marquez Watson-Trent and just being grateful, like guys who's like, hey, I never had a 21 meal plan in a week at my previous school. I didn't look at all this stuff, and there's no they're not spoiled at all by it, but instead it's like, man, this is incredible. And I want to maximize the resources I have around me because I just haven't been around that. I do. When Rule was saying that, I was kind of nodding my head because I was thinking that there is a lot to be said for that sort of hunger. That Rocky, you grew up in the Rocky IV, like you were up in the cabin in the woods training previously, and now look at all these resources before them, and now you can combine what you've done in the past with that. So I think that could be a successful formula. But I think the thing mostly that I like about those guys, but first off, Watson-Trent is just the productivity level. It's proven, and I think he's going to be a really good resource for Vincent Shavers and some young guys like that. I think Jalen George is a guy that people should not sleep on, because I think if you're talking about wild cards like on the D line who, okay, how am I looking at this position group right now? And if I have question and I view it as maybe a question mark, how could that change? It's somebody like Jalen George, like hitting the ground running. And do not forget that he was one of the first visitors in December. on him.
Mhm.
They really liked what he was about, and he was a high-profile guy to them. So people aren't talking as much about him. But if he hit, as much as we get into like Van Poppel and Keona Davis and all these guys, like a guy like George, like fitting in and giving you quality reps would go a long way for how we're viewing that defensive line in September, October, as opposed to how some may question it now.
Hey, if Nebraska makes the playoff 26-27, this whole discussion about Nebraska, Tennessee just completely disappears, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, a big thing this fall, if you go play good ball and you win 9 games or something, I think you kind of take it off the table a little bit, where people get more focused on, okay, they got to 6-3 in the league or whatever. And I know you guys were laying out the format that's being suggested earlier about like the 5 and 6 seeds possibly in the league, like if you could have like a play-in Saturday to get into the playoff and stuff like that. um, all that tells me it is really about league play. What can you get done in conference? Can you position yourself as one of the top 4 teams? I'm not here to play defense attorney for what they did. I understand there's some people really disappointed that game got taken off the table, but it is seriously going to come down to what did you do within Big Ten play? Like, can you get to 6-7 wins and be one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the league every year, and get to a spot Nebraska just hasn't been to in a long time. They've. I think Matt Rule talks a lot about like you want to be relevant, like those last couple of weeks of the season. This is the year you want to see Nebraska where they are 5-2 in the league or something like that, heading to those final 2 games, and you feel like anything could happen. So I do think they have the opportunity to just go play good football and take some of these off the sort of outside the window discussions about scheduling and all that take our time in the off season. They could remove those by doing well.
So tomorrow, the media will be able to talk to associate head coach Phil Snow. I think, he's associate head coach. I think it's been made out to be that he's kind of the right hand man to Matt Rule, but he's not a position coach and he's not a coordinator. And I still think that there are kind of slight question marks on what is he really doing, like what impact does he really have on the program. When you, and I know you'll be there, when you talk to Phil Snow tomorrow, what are you hoping to get out of that convo? What are you hoping to find out after that presser?
I think it'll be interesting kind of getting into like how he's gotten to know John Butler and like what that relationship is like. Obviously there's intrigue because we haven't really had a direct chance to talk to Phil Snow, and just his relationship with Matt Rule and how that's evolved over the years and how he thinks that trust was built to the point that he is such a valuable resource in the program now, and all those various things. But I think just sort of what impact he wants to have with the defensive side of the ball and how he wants to be a sounding board for John Butler and the various things they're doing. I think you want to maybe get into when he looked at last season, what are the 3 or 4 bullet points that he would highlight that are the difference between being the team we were just talking about in the previous answer that wins 7 games in the league and being like a 3-6, 4-5 kind of conference team. So like what does he see as that has to be the next step, and what are ways they might be able to do that? So it is going to be really interesting talking to him, and I honestly think it's going to be a real shot in the arm for everybody. I seriously have been kind of moping around like we need some football like back, like stuff like that in the discussion, and that's where whatever they do with the calendar, I hope it's sort of like it's spread out enough that there's something to kind of to wet our whistle, I guess.
Brian, I feel like you're searching for a purpose here. I got to ask you, on Sunday, this last Sunday, were you sitting on your couch thinking, man, I would love Sunday night football right now?
Oh yeah. I mean, I do go through withdrawals without football, and I've honestly, like, I get why the spring games are leaving. This is a different discussion, but
Go ahead.
I've actually been thinking about it. Kind of stinks that there's not going to be that. Like, I mean, even if it is sort of a facade and all that. There's something about it, like everybody sort of, we can pretend well, like
Yeah.
I like that we can, that we've go over there and we can put 60,000 people, and it has that feeling of like, this is kind of a football tradition. And all that stuff, I do think we have to be careful about. Like, I get why it could be gone. But I honestly, in the last couple of weeks, I've thought I'm going to kind of miss that thing, just having it there as a staple that you can kind of set your watch to and all that stuff. And so, yeah, all this stuff, like tomorrow, I do think Rule does a great job letting his staff be out there, and the fan base getting to know them a little bit. And so I think this is great that the next 2 weeks they're going to do that. And I don't think we should take it for granted in the media that's available. It is important.
I agree. BC, as always, we appreciate it. Thank you.